Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Samira Tilley, Marketing Manager at Assemble Systems. Our webinar today will cover how Lehrer LLC uses Assemble to deliver value to the owner. Now let's get started. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Tim Kelly, Director of Partnerships at Assemble. Go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, Samira. So just for a quick agenda, today we'll briefly do some introductions, and then we're going to turn it over to our guest speaker today, Dareen, and she's going to walk through some of the use cases that they leverage Assemble for in their work process, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So just to introduce myself, Tim Kelly with Assemble System. I'm the Director of Partnerships and how we work with our partners in your construction management solutions in the industry. And my background is in general contractor's office in both pre-construction and then construction. And with Assemble, I've spent time with our product team and ultimately working with a lot of our customers to understand what systems they use, how they use the data, and what's meaningful to their organization and to ultimately the building owner. With that said, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dareen to introduce herself.
Hello everyone, welcome. I'm Dareen Salama and I'm currently with Lehrer LLC as Director of Technical Services. I joined Lehrer about 6 months ago. My task is really to build a division that focuses on implementing technology to increase efficiency, productivity, and certainty of the information that we utilize in our everyday work life in project management and working with the owner and managing large construction projects. My career has always focused on automation in construction and utilizing technology from a construction management perspective, and ultimately became throughout the life cycle of the project with the implementation of BIM and implementation of project management systems. And then early on, my master's was focused on machine learning and natural language processing in construction, which I'm happy that now it's kind of a big leading topic in our industry today, while back then it was only from a research perspective.
That's awesome. Thanks, Dareen. So just a little bit of background of Assemble. Assemble Systems is a web-based product that allows you to combine and organize your models, drawings, and point clouds in a cloud environment, which ultimately you can add information to condition or change data within your model information, connect to other systems, organize things around, and create an audit trail around revisions of model data. And then Dareen will dive into some of the analysis, but ultimately share that information out for reporting purposes and project decision making. So with Assemble, what we're really focused on doing is making it easy to disseminate the model information across your project team and allow others to access and use that information to guide the project decision.
All right, so a little bit about Lehrer as a owner's advisor. So Lehrer has been around since 1996, and what we're really focused on is owner's advisory. So I'll speak about it from a technology perspective. I've worked from a construction management perspective, and other people within our firm have worked from a builder's perspective and from an architecture and design perspective. And what we all kind of agree on is that the best way to really manage and push technology adoption and really make a change in the whole process, whether it's from the delivery method or from the particular mission of making the project better, it's really from the owner's side and from the owner's perspective. And that's where kind of our owner's advisor role comes in. Our team, or our whole company right now, is about 30 people, but despite the size of the company, we're managing a large portion of active construction here in the New York area and in other areas on the East Coast as well. So from a technology perspective, we're still building our team, obviously, but we're focusing on all of these different projects that we currently are working on and any new projects that come about. Some examples of the projects that the firm is currently working on are Rockefeller University, LaGuardia Airport, which in my prior company that I was with, I worked on extensively in terms of technology adoption. and currently focused a lot on the Javits Expansion Center, which is a $1 billion expansion for the Javits Convention Center here in New York, and it's a design build. So the company is involved in a lot of different large projects in terms of an advisory role, and just like we've all experienced, every construction project today has a need for technology and BIM and project management systems and cloud-based systems and really change in workflow and process. So since I've joined the firm, I've been involved in all of these different projects trying to figure out how to make our process more efficient, but definitely more so from the owner's perspective than anything else. So from that is born what is Lehrer Management Systems, which is that division of the firm that I'm talking about. And our focus is really on three key areas. One is the project management systems, which is typically your whatever system the project is using to manage costs, to manage RFIs and submittals and O&M manuals and as-built documents and drawings and plans and photos. So it's really all of the information that is within the project. A lot of it is in the project management information system. And we typically use eBuilder, and most of the times our contractors are using Procore, but that could be any other system as well. We've interacted with others like Unifier and Prolog and others. The other key component is the building information model, which we're really focusing on today and use Assemble for, which is really helping owners figure out how do I implement them, where do I implement them, how do I get started, what does my team look like, do I need to hire people, do I need to change my contract language. Up until I'll say maybe 2-3 years ago, owners were really focused on that's the architect's job or the design team's job or the contractor will take care of that. But owners are becoming a lot more cognizant that this is their data and that they could use it to benefit their own processes, not only on the project that they're working on and not only for coordination purposes, but it really goes beyond that. And then the third piece is really the analytics of it. So if you put those two components together, project management systems and BIM, of course there are other sources of data, but those two pieces give you a lot of data for data analytics for the whole project. And that's a pretty big topic today within our industry and others. And there are very interesting reports about how you first you get started by fixing your workflow and changing your workflow to be more digital, but then you realize that you have a lot of data, and then how do you really utilize that data? And we'll touch upon some of how we would utilize BIM data for data analytics towards the end of this webinar. So speaking of these different data sources and different platforms that we deal with, just to highlight from an overall project controls perspective, it's really not just about reporting backwards or reporting on what happened on the project, but project controls is really a much wider topic involving both technology and data. This is just a sample of some of the software that we use and interact with, but there's definitely a lot more. These are the most common. And then there's a lot of data that we access on a project, we utilize on a daily basis, and that's to the bottom right of your screen, where data sources could be estimates, could be schedules, could be drawings, could be photos, could be commissioning data, could be inspection data, could be any form of documents, could be an accounting system. So there's so much data points, there's a lot of software that we deal with, and one of the biggest challenges that we're dealing with today in our industry is the integration of systems. It is that people still view the project management system as a document repository rather than a tool to automate their workflows, rather than a tool to house data. I still today get the question of, why would I store this as a PDF versus have live data that we could potentially use for data analytics in the future. So that's still that thought process still needs to be instilled in our projects. And then the issue with BIM is, and what we've really been all talking about for a pretty long time, is that it's more than visualization and coordination. We read about case studies, we read about the innovative use of BIM, the research that that is happening at universities and publishing of papers and so on, on how BIM could be utilized beyond visualization and coordination. And all the McGraw-Hill reports that if you haven't seen, you should check those out on the BIM market and the growth and the different uses. But still, on a lot of our projects, BIM is not utilized to its fullest extent. So these are, from my perspective, the biggest challenges. From a best practices standpoint, what I've seen helps with the implementation of technology or BIM or project management systems is that there has to be kind of an overall project control strategy rather than, silos. That's something I think that organizations are still facing issues with, is that, where does BIM fall within the organization? Who's really coordinating that effort? Is it even not just within one organization, but really throughout the whole project? So which company has, BIM specialist, BIM manager, the job description varies, but that kind of, all that disparity and silos of jobs and people and processes on the project, it helps if you have an overall project control strategy where the scheduling team, the estimating team, regardless of what company they work for and what organization they work for, as long as they're part of the project team, I think there has to be an overall project control strategy. There has to be that approach and that thought process of that project controls is really not for reporting, but it's for proactive approach. It has to be timely, it has to be real time. That's where kind of cloud-based systems come in. And there has to be also a discussion on, are the systems that we're currently using sufficient? Should we replace them? Should we integrate different systems? And then that's something I think from Assemble's standpoint, where they started integrating with PowerBI, which is a great step forward, where we should start seeing more integrations within our industry for these different software, even in cases where they're competitors. But that helps us as practitioners in the industry and construction to really utilize the data to its fullest extent. And then the other aspect is that no matter what we do, there's never going to be one system on the project, whether it's for BIM, whether it's for project information. There's always a lot more systems out there, so we have to deal with it. We have to deal with it from an integration standpoint, from an implementation standpoint. And from the owner's side, it's not that we can just dictate and say, like, here, I have Assemble, you have to put everything on Assemble, and anything that is BIM related has to be there. We can't really do that. You can't avoid the fact that contractually, the CM is going to have their own system, the design team will have their own system, and even in cases, where it's a design build or it's a triple P, there's always, even within one team, every company will need to have its own systems from a security standpoint, from permissions, from all that, to keep their internal communication internal only to them. So these are all challenges that we deal with, and kind of the best practice is to look at it as a holistic view and not just every one of these software in a silo, but really look at it from your whole company and project strategy. So moving on to so these are what we deal with in the industry, but what were our needs and what is our view on really how Assemble would fill those needs and other systems as well. So one thing is that estimators, again, to date, I don't know if there are any estimators on the call or not, but they're still it's one of the processes that could be automated, but it's not automated enough in our industry. It could be automated by databases, by improved quantity takeoff, so that's something that we're very interested in, so to increase that efficiency. And a lot of times the turnaround time for an estimate is pretty short, whether it's a change order or a whole project, or even from the contractor's perspective, the time is pretty short, so any time we can save there is great. Changes of anything, and in this case it's really for models, but it's for anything. Every time we get a document, we get a model, we get a drawing, we're always trying to figure out what changed from the last version that I received. And that could be a pretty time-consuming process if it's not automated, but again, today we have a lot of tools that can automate that. Tracking that budget, tracking that scope changes, and figuring out what is really driving the cost of the project, what is driving the increase in cost throughout time. So part of it is really on the cost management side, but also part of it is from when you look at a BIM perspective, after coordination or after anything changes or after any scope changes, issuing bulletins and so on, that could be an indicator for any cost change for the project, and that's something that we definitely look closely at as an owner. Project transparency, I think that not just from a project information standpoint, but really BIM was a black box for a while for a lot of people. I was on projects before where I'm asking about certain things and then just the answer is it's in the BIM, but not a lot of people on the project have the ability to either open the model or view it or even look at the information. So that's something that we definitely look for. That increases, in a different way, it increases adoption. So if people are unable to open the model, then it's really helpful for them to give them that ability as opposed to have them have to look for a BIM specialist, get their time, who's usually tackled by a lot of people on the project. So that's something that helps with adoption to get them to have more direct interaction with the model.
And Dareen, just to jump in and kind of talk a little bit about Assemble in that case, part of our core concept and thought process behind what you just mentioned is the BIM specialist and the person managing a lot of this interaction in the project controls capacity is typically the integrator between different divisions or silos that you mentioned earlier, and Assemble as a system of engagement is all about getting all of those different users access to that BIM model and to the data there, and kind of back to what I mentioned earlier, we're a cloud-based system. What those estimators or the schedulers or the project managers need is simply a web browser to log in, and then all of the information that the BIM team is typically conditioning and changing and organizing is for the use of those team members. And so it's really correlating between what you mentioned about breaking the silos between the divisions and the project controls group, and then the software that you leverage and use to organize that. Just like you said, all of the information isn't an Assemble, but how do we connect systems and how do we connect data from the different contributors and make it accessible across the team?
Right, definitely. All right, so moving on to some of the kind of just what do we really do with Assemble? So from our perspective, there's one of the first things that we purchased at Lehrer as soon as I really joined the company is Assemble. So one thing was, as soon as I joined, a lot of our project managers have so basically those 30 people, let's say half of them are project managers or even more, and each of them is on a project of their own. So, and of the size of construction that I mentioned, so you can imagine how much data these project managers have to deal with and digest in a very quick manner and really advise the owner on approach on a variety of topics like design, construction, commissioning, inspections, the design reviews, everything that you can imagine that really an owner is required to oversee and make decisions on, these project managers are dealing with on a daily basis. So if one person is on a project, we can't really have, a BIM specialist for each project or anything like that. But I did want them to have accessibility to their models. All of them had schedules, had models, had drawings and documentation on their projects. And in most cases, their CMs would have something like BIM 360 or something along those lines on their project that they're using, but our project managers don't really have access to that. And even if they did get access to like an A360 or a BIM 360, they wouldn't get access to the data in a good enough fashion, I think, but they would get access to the views and the viewer, and they would be able to rotate the model and cut sections and so on. So one of the first things that I did was really collect all the models from all of our project managers, publish them, and give them the capability to really view the model in a cloud-based system. So not a lot of IT, nothing really from our IT side, but give them accessibility to do that, not only on their browser, but also on their phones. So that was something that's very helpful. In addition to that, our own users were able to set their own views. So I just very quick training, like let's say 15 minutes. A lot of them haven't used Revit before, haven't used Navisworks, haven't used anything really that's a BIM platform, but I needed to give them a quick way to access the model, and they went in and started setting up their own views for access, and then in some cases they asked me a question, then I could set up a view specifically for them. So that's something that's kind of huge, and setting up views is also very helpful in terms of viewing the model on a mobile app. From a accessing information standpoint, and I think that like if you haven't used Assemble before, you're kind of going to get the idea from here. I'm sorry about the resolution. I'm assuming you're seeing it, it's a bit low. But the idea here is that you click on an object, you can see a lot of different information, and what recently got added that's super helpful for us is that you can also see it in 2D, not only just in 3D. A lot of times people are questioning, what does this look like in the 2D? Is it on the 2D sheet? Where is it exactly, which plan? So that shows up there. And then we could assign additional information. So on the top right of the screen is that, I could assign bid packages. So if I want to see if all the scope is covered by the different bid packages that I see in my schedule of values, then I could very well easily do that, and I can also assign additional information from within Assemble. So prior to having that feature, we used to have to do that in Revit. So I would ask someone, for example, to fill out a spreadsheet, identify the different elements, identify what assembly code they would have or what bid package they belong in, and then import that into Revit and then be able to show them that. But right now they can do that directly, so this screenshot is a bit more clear. So you have here an element, I can click on it either in 3D or in 2D, and then Assemble helps me filter. Let's say if I select this element, it'll show me which sheets it's in, and that also helps with kind of a spot check on model checking. So we used to do a lot of checking between the 3D and the 2D to make sure that they're coordinated, make sure that they're telling us the same thing. The 3D wasn't produced after the 2D sheets were submitted. All these different challenges that any BIM manager really faces. It just becomes a little bit easier when viewing it within Assemble, within one platform. And then from a project manager's perspective that really don't deal with BIM at all, they can easily go into this view that I set up, see all the steel, see the tonnage of steel, see the types of the beams, see the elevations of the beams, and so on. So just going back here, for example, one time, a field person came and asked, I need all the elevations of all the ground beams. So that's something that we were able to do very quickly, as opposed to them trying to look at every 2D drawing and trying to extract that information and look at it in the field. But we can quickly set up a view, and then they would be able to see it on their phone or on their iPad in the field. So that access to model data, I think, is very, very useful, and not only for the project that you're on, but let's say you're preparing an estimate, and a very quick estimate. So us, from an owner's advisory standpoint, we wouldn't be preparing the detailed estimate, but we would be trying to figure out kind of in a quick discussion. Let's say you're in a meeting and a quick discussion, an owner asks, how much would it cost me to build this tower in this location? And then we know that we have a similar project, so our project manager can quickly open up Assemble, look at different quantities, and then compare the cost of that project to a new project that we're considering. So it's not only not only project focused, and I always ask people, owners included, to really look at the big picture and not only look at the project that they're working on right now. Another, I think, very useful feature is that comparing the changes. So you can certainly do this. So a lot of this you can do in other platforms. So if like expert Revit users would tell me, why are you really using Assemble? You could just do this all in Revit. But sure, you can do it in Revit for yourself. Whatever you've prepared in Revit is not usually not really scalable. But within Assemble, if I create a view, it's already there. It's already shared with everyone. It's already accessible to everyone. It's cloud-based. Not, changing the Revit version won't affect anyone. The data is available for everyone in the company instantaneously. And I think that is of a huge value for us. Again, given that you have very limited staff on each project, and you don't need that much training for them to access the information. If I needed everyone in the company to really depend on the BIM team to get access to information, then yes. But if you really want to liberate that information and make it accessible to everyone on the project and get higher adoption, I think cloud-based systems really help with that, and Assemble helps us with that. So just from the screenshot that you're seeing here, it's really that once we receive an additional model and an iteration of the model, then we want to say, what really changed. If I did a model check, or if I provided comments before on the model on issues that we've had before, we want to figure out what changed. From a construction standpoint, this could be for change order quantity takeoffs, for identifying additional scope, and so on. And from a design perspective, we really look at it as design progression. So has the design progressed? Have they modeled additional elements? So what you see here is a comparison between the conceptual design and the 100% DD submission, and we try to figure out, okay, has additional elements been modeled? Has it become more specific? And not only in terms of quantities, but also in terms of the information. So have the families been further defined? Have the assembly codes been further defined? And Assemble really helps with that. And you can also kind of filter them right here for what was added, what was removed, only the type change, only the quantity changed, and so on. So that feature is pretty helpful as a very quick first view. Of course, we would also compare the 2D drawings just in case, but I mean, that's a much faster, easier to absorb view just to get the process all started. The other thing that's very helpful for us is that we don't track absolutely everything on the project, but there are specific scopes of work that our field team would track very closely. Again, whether it's the project manager, or if we have a field team, or even if we have a CM or a contractor where we built it into the contract that we want them to provide very specifics on specific items of the scope for invoicing and for payment. What Assemble helps with, which prior to Assemble, I'll explain both workflows. So with Assemble, we would have a certain view. So this shows you piles and foundations. And then any field person, including the contractor, can go in, click on an object and say, okay, this is 30% done, 70% done, 100%, and those are customizable. We could change those depending on how we choose to track the project. And then they would go in and really tag that. So these are just snapshots. That's from a phone. So you can do that on an iPad, on a phone, and again, the setting up the views makes it much simpler. And then Assemble pushes that information, obviously in real time, back to this view, and then you can really see it in terms of color coding, in terms of quantities of work in place, of what was completed, what was remaining to be done. And this could be done for tracking really not just quantities, but tracking status of inspections, tracking status of delivery, and that data can be integrated with spreadsheets or with anything else that's not necessarily have to be done manually. But I mean, that helps a lot with an increased process. The equivalent to that is taking a PDF and marking it up and then going back to your office and then updating some kind of spreadsheet with the status of each case on or each file. So that's one workflow. Prior to having that feature available in Assemble, what we used to do was have the model in Revit, add additional parameters in Revit for us to be able to track, push that model to something like BIM 360, where we can actually collect data on the model. At the time, that was the only available option that we found, where we could collect data to be input directly back to the model. And then that was not only an expensive solution, but it's also very time-consuming. You have to push data back and forth between multiple platforms, which really compromises your data integrity. So once Assemble really launched the mobile app, that really helped with a much faster process and a much faster workflow. It made this process a lot more possible with less staff. So again, this is an example of the views and how they look like on a mobile phone and or an iPad. And then you can set up these different views, and then once you click on an object, you can really see all these different properties, and you can even add additional properties if you need to. The last piece is really that accessibility to data. Accessibility to data on Assemble is one thing, but then if we look at the full picture, right? So back to kind of my very, very beginning slide of we have a lot of data everywhere. So it's not just Assemble that we're accessing, but so for example, on our projects, we've got eBuilder, we've got Assemble, we've got P6, we've got an accounting system. So for anyone to access information on a daily basis, they would have to log in, their email. They would have to log into eBuilder to find a document. They would have to log into a contractor system, let's say Procore, to find something else. And then someone else is using BIM 360, so they're going to find another model there. And then we're using Assemble, so they're going to log into Assemble to see something else. So I think everyone got the hint that, and everyone experiences that of logging into, at least 5 systems a day to find the information you're looking for, or your alternative is to go to someone who's a specialist in each of those to get the information that you need. So I think that whole thing, that whole cycle is very time-consuming, inefficient for the industry, and I think it happens on all projects, at least all projects that I've been involved in throughout my career here in New York. But essentially, that's a time-consuming task. So we're all looking for ways to make that faster, and data visualization is one of those. So data visualization being, if anyone is using Tableau or PowerBI, so this is a snapshot of PowerBI. And you can certainly do that yourself with platforms that don't offer ready-to-go plugins. So Assemble now offers that extension where we can directly link to Power BI. But really, any platform that you have that can export to Excel or any other database format, or really any raw data format, you can view in Power BI or in Tableau for visualization purposes, and then be able to really look at the data in an aggregate fashion, look at data from different sources. So right now I'm only showing Power BI, but on our roadmap we would eventually include a lot more sources to that. So that will show you all your data in one place. Now the good thing about this is it's not, anyone can create a dashboard, anyone can create a report, but it's not really static. So I'm hoping this is visible right now. So what you can see here is if I'm checking the model for, have all objects been tagged with the assembly code? Is the assembly code at the right level of detail? So I could quickly see here, and that again is accessible to anyone within my company or within my team, even on the owner's side as well. It's not visual, it's really looking at just the model data. And I cannot, express how fast it is to create this. But then you can create this, you can create drill down menus, so it's interactive, it's an interactive dashboard for whoever the user is and whatever the information it is that they're looking for. So I can quickly see, if I want to see my mechanical model, his assembly code's been tagged, so this shows me that not a lot of elements have been tagged, and I need to go back and check, what is the issue, what are the elements that have been tagged, what are the family names, what are the work sets, if they've been tagged with bit packages. That gives me a quick check. Now imagine that from a modeling perspective, if you're receiving models on a lot of different projects, there's not really much time to open Revit for each, look at it from just within Revit, trying to figure out if the model was done according to our requirements from an owner's perspective or not. So this is a huge help. Right now it's showing just one project, but eventually we would have multiple projects on there and be able to quickly check model data. Another video on the same topic is the comparison. So a lot of people kind of are only concerned with the data and not with the view. So if that is helpful in any way, you would be able to see, so what that shows is, for example, trusses, right, or framing or columns, anything that's in the structural model, what has changed from the 100% CD submission to the 30% CD submission? What has changed in terms of elements? And then again, we could obviously, similar to Assemble, if you've used it before, you can change the units, the way that the quantity takeoff is being done, and you can see how things differed from the first version to the next version, again in a very quick fashion. And that's on Power BI. That's really most organizations today have access to it as part of their Office 365 suite. So that's something that's pretty helpful for us. It's still kind of in its initial phases for us, but it's definitely going to be very helpful for our work.
Hey, real quick, Dareen, just to add on the Power BI piece, what I want to make sure is clear on that, and we've discussed it on past webinars, but with the integration to Power BI, what you're seeing is a direct connection to the Assemble database, and that means if a new model is published or Dareen's team goes in and changes or conditions data on the model side, that's immediately reflected in the Power BI interface. So you actually can reach back out and go in and update it at any point in time and get a live look at the data, and it's not an export or an import, but rather a direct connection into the database.
Yes, and that saves up a lot of resources from our side, because then I wouldn't have to create any custom application that pulls data from Assemble into a data warehouse and then into Power BI. I have that direct connection, so that saves us a lot of time, and the data integrity of it as well. So yeah, so this is really just a summary for the different things that we've discussed today. So really, the point is that this solution helps us with automating the estimating to a certain extent. Again, it's quick access to quantities. It gives us the ability, if we did update the model with what was completed in the field, to check against the payment requisition in terms of quantities and what was completed and what work is remaining. And then it helps with generating reports that help us do our job rather than report on what's happening, but it really helps us visualize the data in a much more efficient fashion and things like Power BI and other data visualization tools. And then from my perspective, it really helps with adoption. Just giving people access to Assemble on the project was of value, because then they get to interact with the model much faster and much quicker than having to rely on one person. I mean, they access the model a lot more than they have accessibility into kind of like the P6 schedule, for example, just because they have a cloud-based system that allows them to do so. So what results from that is really that we save time, our workflow is more efficient, our adoption for BIM use and our benefit of the value, again, from an owner's perspective of BIM is much higher than before, of no interaction to a lot more interaction. And then that in the future will give us that ability with that comparison from one model to the next to see trends of how efficient is the design progression, how efficient is construction productivity. All right, so that was it for today.
I do want to go ahead and say thank you to Dareen, and Dareen, you went from top to bottom on a lot of this, and I think if our audience is typically a lot of general contractors, and from the perspective of the builder CM, and what you're kind of talking through as owners' requirements and how you view the world and the data, I really appreciate you walking through what's important for your firm and how you're organizing around project controls to represent an owner. And I think that your perspective and outlook on this is absolutely excellent, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.